Okay, so hi everyone. Hopefully you found that quite easy to be able to join us. Really exciting time now for us at school, year 9. I'll say what I think everyone's always probably thinking at the moment is how have we actually managed to get to this stage? It feels like it wasn't that long ago that they started in year 7, and look at us now picking GCSE. So very exciting. So thank you again for joining us. So what we want to do here is we want to obviously give you lots of information. This is the information that has been shared with students today. So they might have come home with lots of questions. And this is one of the reasons why we do it like this on the same day. So we could talk to you, talk to them, and it just means you can start having those conversations around GCSE options. So there is going to be obviously lots of information that is shared with you. This is being recorded, so you can also take time to go back over it if there's anything that you're not too sure about. And then also students have been given their information booklet today as well, which we did tell them to come home, show you, so that you can start having a look through that as well. So there is also a Q&A option. So if you, as we are sort of going through the evening, if you've got any questions that you would like to pop up into the Q&A box, then we will try and answer as many as we can. Okay, so obviously, big exciting time. There's been a big lead up to doing this. We've talked a lot in PSHE and in form time about aspirations, getting kids really thinking about what it is they can see themselves doing in the future. And you are a really important part of that as well. So for them to be able to make the right choices, having those conversations with you as well is always so helpful. And obviously you need that information too to be able to have those talks. So it's all about making the right choices for them, for their future, what they are going to be able to sustain over the 2 years. So that's why we have this information shared with both parents and with students. And so obviously it's good for you to see sort of a bit of a timeline of how this is going to look, and actually why it is so important for them to get these choices right at Key Stage 3, because obviously at GCSE they then move up into Key Stage 5 and then into life. And it's those GCSEs that are going to be there to give them lots of options later on down the road, even if they're not feeling 100% confident in what they want to do later on in life. They might not have a career path that they would want to, that they know that they're going to head to. That's okay, and we really reiterate that to students. It is okay if they don't know, but having GCSEs is going to be something that opens up lots of avenues for them, as you can see on the slide now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Slipper, our assistant principal, who is going to talk through with you a little bit about the timeline of what's going to be going on at school over the next few weeks leading up to them making their final choices.
Okay, good evening everyone. I'm Mrs. Slipper, Assistant Principal at Bottisham Village College, with oversight of the options process this year. So as you can see, our timeline of events that are coming up, today is the launch event. So it's been the launch assembly for the students and the launch information evening for yourselves. What students will now receive over the next 2 weeks up until half term are some subject information assemblies. So every single subject that is in the option booklet is going to give a short presentation to your children, all about everything that their course offers. So that's the topics that they would study, the methods of assessment for them, what the experience on that course is like. Just so they feel really fully informed. So it's essentially a way of bringing to life for them a little bit more of the written information that you've got in the booklet together at home. After that, after half term, we have a period of time where we offer some further support around the decision making for a short time, and that will be in the form of more through PSHE lessons and inform times. And it would also be an opportunity that if we've identified students that we think are finding the process of making their choices slightly more tricky, then we will also be offering some interviews with yourselves and child if we think that that's something that would be of real benefit to them as well. And then we come up to the deadline, and the deadline for the completion of options is going to be the 10th of March. And there will be details as we go along nearer to that time on how to submit those choices to us. So the focus at the moment is all about understanding the courses and making some decisions about it, so that we can then focus on the deadline when the deadline comes. So it will be step by step that will guide you and your children through this process. So here we are at today. The assembly this morning, students heard all about this process. They saw similar slides to these today. And they also had a presentation from Miss Harwood, our head of English, who told them all about what the English literature and English language courses entail, and the texts and things that they will study in their English lessons. Everybody got their hard copy of the options booklet within assembly today. If for any reason your child was not there today, didn't receive their booklet, we have them ready to hand out to them as soon as we see them in form time again in school. So we'll make sure they receive that. You can also find an electronic copy of the booklet on the school website too. So if you want to download an e-copy, that is there for you. If you go into the curriculum page and then year 9, there is an option down the left-hand menu on that page to go to the Pathways to the Future information page as well. So the booklet contains everything you need to know about courses, guidance on making decisions, about how our curriculum is set up, essentially a summary of all the things that are in that booklet is what tonight is all about. And then some guidance on how to complete your option form and how to make those informed decisions. So we thought we'd start with talk to you a little bit about how you can help your child with their decision making. So as you can see on the screen in that green box there, things that we want you to make sure that you discuss with your children is their progress in each subject, which can be found on Go for Schools. And I'll talk a little bit about how to interpret that information in a moment. Also have a discussion with them about what they feel their strengths are, where they feel their areas for improvement might be. And that might be in a subject that they're really keen to study, but they need to be really aware of what do I need to improve at this year to make sure I'm really GCSE ready for next September. Which subjects they will likely do best in next year. So thinking about which ones are the ones that are going really well, which ones have got highest enjoyment levels. And then obviously thinking about career plans if your child has those ideas already, particularly what course they want to study at sixth form, maybe it might be a shorter term goal, but also trying to find out which subjects support this. So we do encourage students to find out some more about the local colleges as well and the sixth forms and what their offers might be, alongside whether they might be interested in apprenticeship routes or employment with training and various other pathways that they can take as well. Things that you can check with your child to make sure that they are choosing subjects for the right reasons is to ask them questions about, are you choosing it because your friend is choosing it? What is your main motivator for choosing a subject? We don't encourage students to pick because their friend is selecting it, because it then might not be something that they enjoy quite as much. And obviously we can't make any promises about putting friendship groups and things together when it comes to allocating those courses. So there's no guarantees or anything at that stage. The other things that we say to students to make sure that they aren't choosing them for is because they think a subject is easy. Every subject at GCSE has different challenges and ways that it stretches and makes students work hard. So there isn't necessarily an easy option, and the perception maybe is that it's easier if they might find it a subject that they do better in or find it more interesting or greater enjoyment. That's usually why you perceive something to be easier. But overall, the level of challenge is equivalent across the board in all of those different subjects. And the last reason to check with them is to make sure that they're not choosing the subject because they have their favourite teacher or they really like a teacher, because chances are teaching groups change, teacher allocations change over that time, and we wouldn't be able to make a promise that we could offer a particular teacher for a particular subject. So hopefully some sort of common sense conversations. Most students were sort of nodding along at this point this morning and saying that they really, really understood those as well. So going into Go for Schools, this is how to access their information. So once you log in, the menu bar, if you're on the website, down on your laptop, down the side, if you go onto Progress, once you click on Progress, you'll get a page that comes up with a big table of information that looks like a summary like this. This is an example of the English data. You would have English as the subject, and then you'll see information that says target ARE, which is the age-related expectation, which is an indication that if your child has a target of secure, it means their target grade sits between a grade 4 and a grade 6. If their target is a greater depth, it's between a 7 and a 9. So we're looking at those thresholds where we might be interested in looking at college applications. Colleges are particularly interested in grade 4s, grade 5s, grade 6s and 7s for some of particularly the maths and science subjects as well. Beside that, students and yourselves will be able to see their current ARE. And that is entered on what they're currently tracking towards throughout their GCSE or towards their GCSE. So if they're currently secure in year 9, it's an indication that they're tracking towards a grade 4 to 6 at the moment. And obviously, if it shows either developing or greater depth, it means they're working a little bit either side of those and tracking towards a slightly lower or slightly higher grade. The final bit I'd like to point out to you all as well is over on the right hand side in the sheet summary, every subject now has a section called GCSE target grade, which also gives your child and yourselves the information that says this is what their numerical target is for GCSE. So obviously the target band here was grade 4 to 6. Their actual target for GCSE was going to be a grade 5. So for students in that sort of situation, we would definitely expect, like this student here, for them to be secure as they complete each of their assessments throughout these topics, because grade 5 sits right in the middle of secure. If a student is sitting sort of as a target 4, they might have the occasional topic that they've scored developing on for an assessment, and they're the ones we'd really encourage them to focus on, making sure that they work hard to bring up to secure level to try and work their grade 4 up towards 5 instead. And obviously, if their target is a grade 6 within that secure target band, then we'd be expecting to see definitely secure in every assessment that they do, but potentially some of them tipping towards reaching greater depth and showing signs that they might be pushing towards that grade 7 boundary as well, to make sure that on average they're working out towards their target grade of a 6 at GCSE. So that gives you a little bit more granular detail about how your child is getting on in each of their subjects as well. So to tell you a little bit more about what next year looks like, okay, next year the curriculum structure, students take 9 examined qualifications. They also have non-examined statutory PE and PSHE within their timetable, and the way that is divided up is they will have 4 maths lessons every fortnight, 5 English, 6 science, and that's either combined or separate science. If students take separate science, then one of the options below on that list, a further 3 lessons per fortnight are allocated to science as well. So they would end up having 9 science lessons per fortnight. So it's 3 per GCSE qualification. And then there's 2 lessons of core PE. So it's described as core if it's the statutory non-examined PE, and PSHE 1 lesson every fortnight. So what we'll do is we'll talk you through a little bit about how students fill those options around it and how they make a decision between their science choices. For some students, we appreciate that English is a more challenging subject for them and that literacy levels might need extra support. If that is the case, we work through all of that information this year. We may invite students to follow a bespoke pathway called the scholarship pathway, where one of those option blocks becomes a non-examined additional literacy support course. So they get extra support to try and boost not just their English, but their literacy across the wider curriculum as well, to make sure that they are in a position to achieve well in all of their courses. So if that is the case, we will contact you separately to share that information with you, and to talk you through how that might look in their options process as well. So the qualifications that I'm about to tell you about, some of them, majority of them, are what we call GCSE qualifications. There's a number of them as well that are what we call vocational qualifications, and you may come across different titles such as BTEC or national qualifications and certificates and things as well. The broad difference between them, and this is a broad brushstroke, there is variation between particular courses, is that GCSEs are focused on a much more academic and theoretical aspect, whereas vocational qualifications have a bigger focus on practical and skills-based areas and focus on contextualising more in the world of work. The assessments are slightly different. So GCSE assessments are mostly exam-based. That's typical of subjects like your maths, English, science, humanities subjects. Slight exceptions to the rule are subjects like art, where obviously there is quite a big portfolio to produce, but there is also an exam element there as well, and that is a GCSE qualification that is graded on the 9-to-1 GCSE scale, where in old terms a grade 4 is what was a grade C previously, and a grade 5 is a high C pushing towards the grade B. And a grade 7 and above is what the old grade A was on those qualifications. So if you're thinking about, like myself, having different qualification grading systems, a 7 was an A and a grade 4-5 was the grade C boundary, sort of separated out as to a high pass or a low pass. In contrast, the vocational qualifications are more predominantly coursework based. So that means continuous assessment. So they come with a different type of pressure that comes along with all of these qualifications, rather than it being all based on that terminal assessment at the end. There are lots of smaller deadlines throughout the 2 years that have to be met to make sure that units and topics are submitted in a continuous manner, and they all contribute to those qualifications. So essentially everything counts when you're taking those subjects. That would be subjects such as health and social care and construction. Some of the other courses there that focus on that world of work will have those requirements with them, and they have a slightly different grading system. So they're graded a pass, a merit, distinction, distinction star. And that's on a similar scale. It doesn't match exactly equivalent to the 9-to-1 system, but it's very similar. So a merit is slightly higher in grade than a grade 5. And a merit is where a lot of the colleges are starting to look for those qualifications to be achieved at, to move on to post-16 education with those. So to talk you through how the booklet is sectioned up, it's put into 3 sections. The first section is the core subjects. We think it's really important to make sure that rather than just telling you that your child is going to be doing maths and English and definitely some science, that they have an understanding of what those courses entail. So that gives them an insight into those nice and early. And those are automatically allocated out to students. There's no requirement to tick a box to say taking maths and English. The rest of the subjects are then divided into 2 sections, option A and option B. Option A is one we describe as the science option, and I will take you through just in a moment over the slide the process of choosing between separate and combined science and how that works. And option B is what we call our open option, which is where all of the other courses and sit together to make some choices. So option A constitutes three of the GCSEs. And science is compulsory for students, so it's not an option to take it, but there are 2 pathways to choose from. So students must choose either option A1, which is the separate sciences, so that means individual qualifications in biology, chemistry or physics, and they take all 3 at the end that says your grade for biology, your grade for chemistry and your grade for physics. Alternatively, option A2, which is combined science, which is the equivalent of 2 GCSEs. So students still study elements of biology, chemistry and physics, but with a slightly lesser depth and breadth than the separate sciences, because it only totals the value of 2 GCSE qualifications. So to then select a 3rd GCSE, students have a selection from either computer science, French, German, Spanish, geography and history. With those subjects there, it's important to note that computer science, we do expect students to be greater depth in maths when they submit their form to us, and that's simply because the maths element of the programming side of the computer science course requires a very high level of mathematical ability as well along beside it, to support students if they aren't greater depth and are interested in computing courses. We do have the ICT course, which is focused a little bit less on the maths heavy side element, but still on that use of computers and how that transfers into the world of work. So much more sort of application based approach rather than theoretical approach in the ICT course. In French, German and Spanish, we do ask that students have been studying them currently this year, so previously, or they have other relevant experience that would predispose them to being able to complete that GCSE. So there, unfortunately, we can't offer the option to pick up a language at GCSE level because the foundations that are required have been studied for the previous 2 or 3 years to make sure they are ready to progress through the final 2 years to the end of the GCSE. So a few little caveats in there to consider, but generally doors are open to all students on quite a wide level, because a lot of our students are obviously taking their languages, potentially 2 of them, geography, history and science. So a wide range of options sitting in option A. Okay, option B again is making up 3 of those 9 GCSEs, and at this point all subjects are available. So that's all of those subjects from option A2, so all of the languages, history, geography and computer science. But in addition, all of those subjects that you can see on the screen there are also open for students. We ask students to select 5 options for this stage, and this is because we need to make sure that we can fit every child into a class and into the timetable next year. They will be allocated 3 of those preferences. So what we ask students to do is to select 5 preferences, rank them in order of number 1 being the most important to them down to number 5, but ensuring that whichever ones of those 5 they receive, they would be happy to be following any of those courses. What you will see in the options booklet is there is some additional information with those, where it will say on some of them, for example, art and photography, that they cannot be taken together. So what that means is a student cannot study the art course and the photography course at the same time. That's simply because there is such a large overlap between them that they are considered equivalent qualifications, and it wouldn't give students that breadth and depth of qualification moving forward into their post-16 options as well. So if it says may not be taken together, a student may still put both of those subjects in their selected 5. But it means that only one of those could be allocated to them in that options process. So there's just some careful consideration around those subjects there. And the other one I'd just like to draw attention to is the PE and sports studies. You can see they're put together on that list. That is because with the PE and sports studies, there is a heavy emphasis in the PE GCSE on practical aptitude and also science knowledge. So students taking the PE GCSE, a lot of their final grade is also dictated by how well they're getting on in science and whether they are playing competitive sports outside of school. So obviously what we want to do is make sure that all students have an opportunity to pursue a sports qualification, even if they're not, sort of elite athlete, competitive athlete outside of school, but they enjoy particularly their PE lessons. And the sports studies course opens up that opportunity. And the GCSE course is predominantly theory-based. There's a lot of classroom-based work, so the reliance on that competitive sport is often outside of the classroom to maintain that standard, where the sports studies course has a lesser extent-based emphasis on the practical, but it also opens up opportunities without emphasis on the science, but looking at sport in the wider world and in the media, and how the more of the practical applications of sports studies in the world of work. So 2 options there. What we will do is we will take, if you choose PE sports studies, we will look at competitive sport that you play. We will look at your science grades at the moment, and we will look at which course would be the one that would be best suited to you to achieve the best possible grade. Because what we obviously don't want to do at this stage is set anybody up on a course that they are going to find they are sort of almost capped at getting a particular grade just because their practical element, for example, is not as strong as it might need to be to access some of the higher grades. So those are all of the courses in there. There is lots of detail in the booklet around each one, about how they are assessed, the exam boards we follow, topics that are covered. And your children will all receive assemblies about every single one of those over the next 2 weeks. So all of the information that I'm giving you now, plus having the booklet explained in more detail in those assemblies. So once we've gone past that, at the end of this half term, we come back after half-term holiday, and we'll be offering students some further support in their decision making. So what we're hoping is that over that half-term holiday, that gives them a little bit of time to reflect and to think about all of the information that they've received, and start firming up those choices that they are, wanting to pursue next year in the preference order that they would like to put them in. We will make sure that we continue to have those conversations through PSHE and form times to make sure that students are receiving guidance from us as well further to answer their questions and help them make sure they finalise those choices in time for the deadline. If in those conversations, or if a student comes to us to ask that question, we will make sure that they have some careers meetings arranged if they're thinking about future careers and they'd like to know more about the colleges, for example. And also, if we think it would be beneficial to have an interview between ourselves, yourselves and your child, we will also send you an invite to join us for a guidance interview in the week before the deadline to submit those, just to make sure that any of those questions or uncertainties have all been ironed out. But obviously, if your child is feeling very certain about their preferences and are in a really good place, we won't put any of those additional bits in at that moment, because we know that they're ready and prepared. So As we come up to the final bits of information I'd like to share with you tonight, the first bit is around allocation of courses. So after that deadline on the 10th of March, courses will be confirmed just before the end of the summer term. And I know that feels like quite a long time away. The reason being that we have the time frame and ask you for these early choices is simply because when we begin the process of putting next year's timetable together, that has started at the moment. We've started preparing a model of what that will look like next year, and we need to know numbers of students that have got preference for courses that we can marry up with numbers of teachers we've got, space in the timetable we've got, to try and make sure we find a balance. But obviously over that time there may be changes that we can't preside for, whether we get any staffing changes, whether we get anything else unexpected that comes up for our timetable. So we have to wait right up until the end of the summer term to make sure that we've finalised all of those groupings and allocations for students to be able to share them with you. So you will receive a letter with those options to you before we finish at the end of the summer term. Obviously, we will do our very best to offer all students their priority subjects. So ideally, we'd love to give everybody their top 3. However, like all schools everywhere, we cannot make that guarantee that we will be able to do that. We use computer software because we have such a big year group to make sure that we are fair and unbiased in that process. So all of their options are placed into the computer, and the computer works to allocate the best set of options to every child they possibly can. So we don't end up in a situation where one student has been given their top 3 and another student has been given their bottom 3. We don't end up in that situation. There will be a spread and a mix for all students, trying to give them the best possible 3 that we can. So obviously with that, everybody needs to make sure that their 5 preferences are really carefully considered, and the order that they are placed in is really carefully considered as well, with particular care thinking about some of our more popular subjects. So usually food, nutrition and business studies are particularly popular, and they're the ones that need the most careful consideration of how important they are for you to study and where you put them in that preference sequence. So finally, we get up to the deadline in our timeline. The deadline is Tuesday, the 10th of March. This is submitted electronically, so there will be a link sent out to you to complete the form with your child. We do ask that there is a tick box on that page just to confirm that you have seen what your child is selecting and has agreed those. And students will be sent that link a few days prior to the deadline for completion. The reason that we send it out quite close to the deadline is we know that final decisions and options can change and vary, and what we want to make sure you do is just submit that one form when you've got to that final stage of making those final decisions, without the kind of discussions of I'd like to make changes, because that doesn't make it very simple for us to make sure we're completing the process very easily. So we ask students to try not to submit before the date. So Tuesday the 10th, you have the form for a couple of days just to familiarise yourselves with it, and we ask students to click that submit button on the final day so that they make sure they're really satisfied with all of those final decisions. So just going to hand back over to Miss Cole, who's just going to give you some final words of advice and tips.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so before I do that, just a reminder, we do have the Q&A box, so if anyone does want to type anything in there whilst I go through sort of these final tips, then please do. So basically, we know that this is a big deal. We know that this can be, quite anxiety inducing for kids. So we say to them, stay calm. Knowledge is power. That is, absolutely true, isn't it? And we really encourage them to be super proactive, go and speak to teachers. Teachers will be very happy to show resources that they use in lessons, whether that be textbooks, or show examples of current GCSE students' books and what that would look like. We want them to ask lots of questions. So I know that there may be lots of questions that you have that they have when they've sort of sat down and read through the booklet as well. So yeah, please do encourage them to go and speak to form tutors, come speak to us, subject teachers, to speak to them, ask them the questions that they would like answering. Also, listen to the advice, because it'll be the subject teachers that are the experts on how that student is doing and what the GCSE course is going to look like. you know, there will always be students who in their minds they think, right, this is what I want to do, they know it straight away, that's great, but we do say it's really, really important to make sure that you read through all of the information, make sure that you're looking at everything, every course, really engage with those assemblies. So we had it on English today, so every day they'll learn more. My daughter's in year 10 and her option changed when she heard through the assemblies, and she picked one that I hadn't expected her to pick. But that's the whole point, isn't it? That's why we go through all of this and give them all the information that we can possibly give them so that they can make those choices that are best for them. It's really important to choose a balance of subjects. Like we've said before, they don't want to they want to have a really open sort of career path for them at this point. We don't expect students to know what they want to be when they're you know, in their adulthood. And then, like we say, don't panic about that, because actually that's, you know, part of the reason is that we have GCSE options just to narrow things down slightly, but there's still so many options for them career-wise later on down the line. So I hope that's all been really useful for you, and obviously I hope that you've been able to have a look at the or that you will have a look at the booklet and sit down with your child and, you know, help us in helping them make the best decisions that we can. Okay.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Miss Cole. I've just been having a look at the Q&A just to answer a few of those questions that have been coming in there. So there was a couple of questions asked around the target grade. So the target grade is a flight path that we use a group called the Fisher Family Trust, who are a national charity, and they gather wide amount of target data from across all schools. So it starts from Key Stage 2 prior attainment, and they put a flight path and a trajectory together for those. What we tend to find is those target grades are generally quite accurate overall. Like with everything, we obviously do see some students that find them more challenging to reach, some that find them that they sit above them, but for the majority of cases for students, they are absolutely a really strong aspirational goal that we set for our students to try and achieve. We use a measure that sets targets that if our students were to achieve everything, they will rank us in the top 5% of schools nationally. So we sit with a really strong academic aspiration for our students there. Further question that we just had was, can you put an option down more than once to try and get that option? Unfortunately not. So if you do put an option more than once on the form, we will be coming back to you to ask you to reselect an option. If you do put it on more than once and we don't take a full suite of 5 from you, there is a greater risk that you will have a gap in your timetable, and then what we will end up doing is coming back to you once all of the subjects have been allocated to students to tell you what places are left. So please don't put an option more than once. Please make sure you only put it in there just that one time and with a breadth, so make sure you've got the best chance of getting a full set of courses that you're interested in doing. A link to the booklet is available on the school website. We will also make sure that goes out on social media as well, so through Reach More Parents to you, and also on any other platforms that we can, to make sure you've all got access to that really readily and easily. Question about sports study. Is it GCSE graded? The sports study qualification is graded as a vocational qualification, so it will follow the similar pass merit distinction format rather than the 9-to-1 system. So either way on those ones, we've done background research on those. They don't affect which pathway you can then move on to at post 16. So the options are still there for taking A-level PE and sports courses or vocational sports courses with whichever pathway you choose. Timetables, as I said, timetable, we're finalising all of that information just before the end of the summer term. Similarly, it will be going into Go for schools in the same way it does over the summer holidays, so students will be able to see that information before they come back to school as they would normally. I've seen that there's also somebody who's just put a message about being able to update an email address. If you could send that query through to the inquiries at Bottisham Village College email address, we'll be able to get that updated for you. to make sure that any changes that have taken place, you're still able to access the system completely. It's all linked together, so it will be what we use for all correspondence with you. So if you do need to update any of your contact details with us, please pop that through to inquiries@Bottisham, and we will be able to do that for you. If students select one option for A2 along with combined science, will they be guaranteed that one option? We've not had a situation before where we haven't been able to allocate one of those A2 options to a student. So I would expect that to be the case again this year, that we'll be able to offer all of those A2 options without any issue there. But I will not make any guarantees about that one year on year if there's anything unexpected that happens. But I'm hoping, yes, that will be the case. Did anybody else have any further questions? Please type them in the chat box. Myself and Miss Cole, Miss Judge, Mr. Fulham will stay here for another 5 minutes. So if you have any questions you'd like to just type in. Otherwise, everybody, this evening, and we will put this recording up on the school website for you to access again should you need to. Thank you very much. Good question that's just come in there. Would a student have to change between X and Y band? We sometimes have a small amount of movement between the X and the Y band at the options stage to make sure that we can allocate students their subject. Where possible, we try to make sure that we keep the bands as consistent as possible, because we appreciate that students have particular friends and people that obviously, not that they're trying to choose their options with them, but that they are comfortable working with and peers that they are more familiar with. So we do try to manage that as best we can, and we will talk to students obviously if there is a need for a band change and we think that might be a particular concern for them. The question around the greater depth for computing, high with coding, in maths, we still need students to be looking at being greater depth in maths as well, because the computing course is not just about coding. There are a range of other elements that they need to be able to show in that course as well. And we have seen a trend where students need to have those math skills much higher. So we're consistent with all students in that expectation. Previous years, proportion of students have had their first three choices. It's been a bit variable in different years. We've obviously had different reasons for timetabling and staff, but on the whole, we're generally quite successful with the number of students that we can offer their first three preferences to, and if not, usually their fourth preference. The fifth preference is very much a safety net, and a number of students will receive their fifth preference, but usually they've then got two of their top preferences as well within that process. Requested careers chat. If you ask for a careers chat, please just ask Form Tutor or myself or Miss Cole, and we will be able to put that careers meeting in place. The subjects that are set or banded on ability at GCSE level, maths is set and banded at GCSE level, as is English. The other subjects, science do some broad streaming, but there is more variation because obviously there's the separate science and the combined science pathway that students are already separated by. But we do look to try and look at the attainment of students there. All other subjects are mixed attainment classes. The computer software to allocate choices, it doesn't take into consideration career aspirations. So that's why students need to consider really carefully the priority order that they put their preferences in on their form when they submit that. Unfortunately, we can't add in whether we've got particular career pathways. A lot of what students are looking at for their career pathway have lots of variations in the qualifications they can take and follow, or whether they can also pick them up when they move to their post-16 qualifications as well. There's a lot of opportunities there. So students often wonder about subjects such as business studies, for example, and PE. They can pick up subjects like that at post-16 without necessarily having the GCSE qualification for that pathway. So that is one just to keep in mind. Functional skills. I know I haven't mentioned that tonight. That's to do with the scholarship pathway, and that is something that we will contact parents about to discuss, but we do not offer functional skills as a selectable option course at Bottisham because it's quite a specific and niche area to look at for students. So it's based a lot upon their need and what they need at that time. And we work very closely with our learning support department and look at the wider picture in the mainstream subjects. So how students are progressing in, particularly in English and maths for functional skills, to understand what their needs are at that time. Okay, how are vocational subjects viewed compared to GCSEs for university applications? They're both viewed very favourably. Essentially, when you're looking at the university in particular, it is worth looking at their application criteria as well. It's often linked to the pathways that they follow. So naturally, GCSE qualifications lend themselves to slightly more academic university courses. Vocational qualifications lend themselves to some of the more vocational based university courses as well. So that sort of pathway starts to shape itself from this point moving forwards. But there is, at this stage, there is overlap and movement between those, particularly going into the post-16 2 years at colleges. So it's just worthwhile bearing that sort of thing in mind, just in case there is anything particularly further down the line that you are interested in, making sure that you've taken account of. Additional maths, what we do when we look at additional maths is the maths faculty will be looking at that offer for students later on, and they will contact students whether they think that further maths is an option for them, and they complete that separately from their GCSE options on their timetable. So it's outside of timetable time that they complete their further maths qualification. Business studies, when you say confirmed as an option, all of the subjects we've put in the booklet are options that we are hoping to offer. We cannot necessarily guarantee that all options will run, but that comes further down the line. We have to take all the options from students into consideration, and then as our timetable builds and our staffing builds for next year, we will then be able to confirm whether we can offer and run all courses. But we are optimistic at the moment, and hopeful that we'll be able to offer as many courses as we can. Okay, everyone, thank you very much this evening. Thank you for all of your really poignant questions that you've asked this evening. I hope that's helped to give you lots more clarity around the options process. And obviously, if questions come to you after this evening, please do not hesitate to contact us and send those in, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you, or send your child with their questions and we'll be more than happy to answer them in school for them, and help them through this new exciting phase of their journey. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Take care now. Thank you.